Je suis très heureuse d'être ici à Paris pour NFT Paris. Thank you all for coming. Now, Valentine's is not usually the day where you think about decentralized infrastructure, but if you think about it, DePIN is all about commitment, trust, and making meaningful connections. So from this side, I want to introduce myself. I'm Estefania. I'm the founder of Conquista PR, which is a crypto communications firm that focuses on thought leadership and reputation management. And we help our clients establish trust, and which is a really big challenge in this ever-evolving landscape. Now, we have an incredible lineup of experts, and we can't wait to hear more about them. So now they're going to tell us what they do and why it matters. Over to you guys.
Then we just do it in order. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. I've had the pleasure of already being on stage yesterday. Today with a little bit less pressure, which is very nice. And I'm happy to see so many people, although probably some of you have been on some side event parties yesterday. I'm Dominic. I do quite a few things. I've been working in the automotive and charging industry for several years, and have been building up a European-based EMSP, which is basically a charging network company. And afterwards, I ventured into Web3. I built an agency, basically supporting projects in their community building and in their marketing efforts. And during that time, I basically came across DePIN. And knowing from experience on how the EV charging industry works, it felt like, okay, well, this approach can really drastically transform how EV charging can work and really provide massive values and benefits. So that's why, together with my co-founders, we started building Charge. And basically, well, long-term vision is to decentralize EV charging by using the DePIN approach. And that's what I do.
Amazing, thank you.
Yeah, bonjour, everyone. My name is Ugochukwu Aronu, and it's Valentine's Day. Like Laura said, we don't really expect people to be listening to, DePIN, but yeah, very happy to have you all seated. I'm the co-founder and CEO of YCrypt. And YCrypt, what we do is we decentralize internet, connectivity, and we're also building, a monetization network out of it. I got into crypto in 2016. I'm an electronics engineer by discipline. I lead engineering at YCrypt, also built out like DeFi applications like Zen Finance, and video games as well. That's why the previous speaker, working at Rockstar, really caught my attention. And I am very excited to be here today, my first time in Paris, and very excited to be speaking on DePIN today. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jason Teutsch, founder of Truebit. I'm a mathematician by training, and so Truebit was the first scaling solution for Ethereum. The technology that we brought in is probably best known for what's used in every optimistic rollup, the verification game. And so we used that to originally to provide certificates of code execution to smart contracts, and then we branched out into the rest of the world, including DePIN and RWA. So that's where we are. Thanks.
Thank you, guys. Thank you very much for the lovely intros. So now we're going to dive right in, and we would like to have a bit of a temperature check on what is the state of DePIN and what current trends you're seeing in this cycle. So over to you, Dominic.
Well, I think we're still pretty much at the beginning, to be honest. The term has been coined, if you think about it. I mean, some people have been using it before. It has been coined more or less in 2022 by Messari in that kind of poll on Twitter. I think it was like 90 people actually participating in it. It wasn't too many. And then somehow found its way into the masses, right? There's been massive discussions about whether you should actually correct it and split it up between maybe DVIN, DePIN. So the concept of it, I think, is getting more and more known and also scalable and also working, but it yet has to prove in many cases the revenues that are being made in the real world to be sustainable and to be profitable for the companies, right? Because that's one of the main kind of perks or benefits or promises actually that DePIN does, is that it's real world revenues that are made from industrial companies or industry players or traditional companies that are being brought onto Web3, right? So it's not just we're exchanging magic internet money, but it's actual real world revenues and utilities. And I think this is where, with a lot of projects having launched their token now in the last 2 or 3 years, or already gearing up for launch now, basically, right, where we are in better market conditions overall, still the business models have to be proven to be actually working on the long term. And yes, there are those big players, those, let's say, older players, not meaning that in any negative way, like Helium, Filecoin, who paved the way for basically the whole sector. And you can see them doing a really, really good job, but also having to adjust their models partially. So I'm obviously super bullish on DePIN overall, but I do think that there's still quite a lot of work in front of us.
Right. Ugo, Jason, what is your take, and what would you say are promising projects in the landscape currently? Promising projects in the landscape currently.
Promising projects in the landscape, like Dominic mentioned, something. I mean, you have like Helium, Filecoin. There are more projects coming on board. I think I've seen in Hong Kong last year. White Crypt, but then I met DePIN Network. The guys doing VPN, stuff. And personally, I think these projects are promising. But one of the major things that we need to look out for is sustainability, right? That's critical because even for us, we were very careful when we even launched, our tokens, managing distribution, managing release to make sure that you don't, whatever mistakes you're going to make, you make them pretty early and then you can correct them over time because it's a new market, it's a new industry, and you're building not something that is entirely new, but you're taking what is existing and making it better, offering more value, right? So yeah, sustainability is something critical and something I believe more projects should sort of look out for, yeah.
Yeah, thanks. I think there's a lot of projects that are interesting out there. I'd love to see Airbnb for your GPU taking off. I think that this idea that there are resources out there that are being underutilized is a great promise of DePIN, and they're also the most exciting applications are probably the ones that haven't happened yet, where decentralization is actually essential to making it work, and they're going to make things, as Dominic already pointed out, it has to work economically. The cost that people are willing to pay has to be more than what it costs to produce, and so on and so forth. So I think some of those things still have to be worked out, but there's certainly a promise there, which is promising. Thank you.
Okay, that's great. Thank you, guys. So we're going to move on to the technical side of things a little bit on are token rewards sustainable, or do we need alternative business models, in your opinion?
That's a good question. So I think I'll finish it with an answer. So I think that the token doesn't make anything, it's nothing magical about the token. You still have all the requirements that you have for economics in a regular business. You have to match the price point, you have to have a demand and ability to supply whatever the product or service is. Having said that, I think the tokens can still be a really great point. They're a natural place to go with decentralization, and there's still plenty of room to be creative and explore the type of things, using tokens as licenses and things which are, they're really accessible. So that piece is really good. All right.
Thank you.
So personally, when it comes to token rewards, I think they're interesting, but it's very important for us to understand that in terms of sustainability, having just token rewards wouldn't suffice, because you also don't want to have customers or users who are just there for the rewards, and if the rewards don't exist, the technology basically doesn't exist. So there has to be a sort of balance, right? And one thing we have learned over the years of building White Crypt, we've been there since 2018, is that it's very important to have a sustainable business model and a product that works. So that way, people don't see the reward as the reason of, to buy your service or to use your service, but see it as just a sort of incentive. And also the tokens should also act as a sort of economic deterrent against malicious actors, like having like a proof of stake mechanism where they have to have some form of investments to prevent them from performing malicious acts on your system. So, but I think having sustainability is critical and not just token rewards. Yeah.
Can I add on to what you just said? I think what you said is really great. Sometimes what you see in some projects is incentives to create additional supply, and it's almost always the demand that's really the tough side. So I think making this challenge of, how can we create economics that help to support the demand side. I think that's where this opportunity is to take off for DePIN. So, sorry, over to you.
Yeah, I want to. I agree with what you guys said. I maybe want to add one or two other kind of thoughts. And what is interesting to me, don't get me wrong, guys, I'm not a tokenomics expert, right? There's people that know a load more about that stuff than I do. But what I saw a couple of times in the last months was adjustments to tokenomics in a way where, for example, I think Helium was suggesting, and they put it to a vote, on increasing the cap on their token supply, right? Because they realized, well, okay, we've got a natural kind of cap over here. And I read a piece just recently that was also stating, like, why do we have a token cap? And it feels a bit like, well, okay, we do have a token cap because it's just the way that it's done with Bitcoin. But if you can actually design the tokenomics in a way where you don't necessarily need a cap and still don't go into a massive inflation, it might be the more reasonable model. But then again, you have the early adopters saying, oh, well, but your token isn't capped, so I'm getting dust when I get my share, whatever. And I think there needs to be a kind of mentality switch when it comes to that. Another thing that I wanted to say, and that's exactly what you mentioned, the token reward is a nice kind of incentive on onboarding users, but it cannot be your only perk, right? Because it might be that for the initial airdrop or a couple of months after a launch from the token, actually, it's substantial value that is being provided to the people. But if we are in a bear market situation and there's no value behind the token anymore, people just will stop using your app, right? So it's a great way to onboard people, but it cannot be the only measure on how you make sure that people continue to interact with your solution, continue to provide a substantial value, continue to maintain, run, or operate hardware or virtual hardware. So yeah, that's my kind of take to it.
These are great insights. So we're going to move on to the security part of things. And I just wanted to ask, how can projects ensure real and verifiable contributions to their networks? And should they require auditable verification for critical resources like computing power, wireless nodes, or storage?
Jason, do you want to take that? I think that's exactly your topic.
Sure, okay, I go again. Yeah. Sure. So how can projects ensure real and verifiable contributions to their networks? Should they require real-time auditable verification for critical resources like computing power, wireless nodes, or storage, in your opinion?
That's yours, right?
Yeah, well, everyone will get a chance. I wish we had more than one microphone, but I also think, thank you. And by the way, yeah, here's to the bear market projects out there that don't depend on the price the price of Bitcoin. So yeah, I mean, I guess I like the question has a position built into it already, which I think makes it interesting. Surely we have to provide some sort of mechanism. I mean, you throw out the idea of audits, whatever it is. If you're asking people to do work, especially if they're anonymous, you can't expect to get the right results if you don't have some mechanism for checking the answer or the output or whatever the thing is that they're building. So surely in all cases that has to be that has to be true. So it doesn't matter. And I guess we're talking about physical things, but I think it also applies to compute services as well. We went through the Airbnb for your GPU, but anyway, short answer. I'll let over to you, Ugo.
Yeah, I think verifying resources is really important. For example, like compute. I mean, maybe whatever services are at all. In our own case, is what we verify is the uptime, the bandwidth you're sharing, and your location as well, because these things serve as inputs or parameters that allow us to incentivize you, over time, and also allow us to push like traffic to you in terms of, let's say, like the ad network that we built out recently. So I think verification of all these parameters is really essential, and also considering the fact that people who are using these services are not necessarily, maybe they're not the one, they will not always put out their real identity. Anonymity is important, but then you also need to ensure that there are mechanisms also against things like, malicious actors, like I mentioned previously, having like a sort of proof of stake economic models or economic, designs that will prevent people from acting maliciously. But yeah, I think all these things come together to ensure that systems are, sort of secured, right, before our different parameters that make up a system are actually like verified before, while people are using them. Yeah.
Yeah, let me just add, I think it's absolutely crucial. It's crucial for several reasons. First of all, because if we actually have a token incentive, the incentive of basically providing fraudulent data or just malicious actors in general is very, very high, right? So as a project or as a company, you have to ensure that either the data or whatever is actually being run or provided is inherently correct. And this is something where we not only have to do that as projects out of protecting ourselves against malicious actors, but really to increase the value. So a very simple example could be data collection or data contribution, basically, which is something that we have as the main kind of onboarding task on Charge. It's data contribution on chargers that are publicly, stationed somewhere, right? So you can basically review a public charging station. And we have to make sure that the information is correct, that the person is actually physically on that location. And there's good ways to actually do that. I mean, a very simple way is just doing a GPS fence, but then you can spoof it, right? But I think it was in the Masari 2024 State of DePIN report where they introduced, or not introduced, but they basically mentioned a proof of location technology, which could be a very good way to actually make sure that people really are at that location. Because, and this is differentiating DePIN projects compared to traditional players or Google, the likes of Google, right? I can review any restaurant in Paris and give it a 0-star rating, 1-star rating. You cannot do 0 stars, 1-star rating, without having ever been there, right? Nobody controls that, which in the case of Google, it actually might be okay because, well, I don't get any incentive from providing my data. Yet, by the way, millions of people do that, and they spend a lot of time on that. But if there is the case that revenue is being made from that data, on the companies and you have less data sources and also the people are being rewarded for it, you have to make sure that the information provided is actually correct and it's not fake data.
Correct.
Add on that one, I think as a general strategy, if you're thinking about developing a project like this, think about the situation. How would you address it if there's a dispute? Like, I don't know, say you're the restaurant owner and you got a bad review. Like, is there a mechanism to figure out whether it's legitimate or not? Or if you're providing electricity for electric cars, one person says, I got 5 kilowatt hours, and it says, no, I supplied you 50, right? I mean, so you can kick that can down the road, but eventually, if you get to the point where it's actually happening, you're going to have to answer these questions. And those are interesting things to think about.
That is great, and that's a great way to align incentives and actually like verify that things are working properly. So now in that regard, we're going to move on to governance and leadership. And so as we know, many Web3 projects, they face leadership instability, and we would like to know what role does governance play in DePIN projects?
Okay. Well, so I have to be very, practical. When it comes to governance, right? Yeah, it's always really interesting to talk about decentralization of governance. But I think most of these things would come in phases. At early stages of projects, most projects are trying to, hit the ground running, fix their tech, get funding, solve very critical, problems that will allow them to get to a certain stage. And I think at that stage, sort of decentralization of governance might not make a lot of sense because you might now see external players, maybe huge token or bag holders, depending on what drives governance, maybe what gives voting power. People might now start making decisions that would disrupt or change the direction of the business, right? So I think it's important for companies to have their internal structure properly set up and the business put in its position where it can grow, and then from there you can now start getting external, advice or external input, because it's very easy to follow the, crypto model where they're like everything is decentralized, but then at very early stages it might not be very great for a business, especially a business that wants to, continue and run, sustainably. But if you open it, some people might just want to do things that will give them quick money, something approve, or make proposals that will just make sure that it gives them extra tokens or extra value for a short term, and then the business closes and they move to another project.
Right.
Yeah.
And also, go on, Jason.
Oh, I'll just say, I think in governance here, like maybe oftentimes less is more. If you can make a protocol that reduces the governance, it's, again, an interesting thing to think about, simplify, but yeah, it's sometimes, right. I also don't think it's all or nothing. It doesn't have to be completely centralized or completely decentralized. You take the components that are going to make it work and provide the most effective and cost-effective and best service.
That is great. I wanted to pose another question on what you think are the best strategies for ensuring smooth executive transitions in Web3 projects in that regard.
Smooth executive transitions?
Yes.
In what kind of, to be able to actually make decisions
in regards of governance?
Well, I mean, I think voting mechanisms are a pretty easy take on that part, but I was thinking actually more about building the culture around how you run or how governance is being implemented and how it's actually executed, because I do strongly believe that you first have to build a certain culture within the people or within the group of people that potentially have a say in your governance, because otherwise you build on something that is very unstable and that might be very extrinsically motivated rather than intrinsically motivated. And you want to make sure that the people who actually will eventually have a say are, as Ugo, as you said, not just short-term incentivized, but really long-term incentivized. And this has to be built on a basis of having a culture that enables this group of people to actually have meaningful and fruitful discussions that don't necessarily have to have the same opinion about things, but it has to be a constructive criticism. And you see that a lot if you go into Discords or Telegram groups or whatever of projects, that actually it's either toxic positivity or it's just literal fudding. And you have to build on that basis and build long term. So going back to your first question, I don't think it makes sense to introduce a governance mechanism too early on in the project, because you didn't literally have the chance to build a culture and build on the people that really are long-term motivated.
That's great. So this is going to be a fire question. So in one sentence, you guys, what needs to happen for mainstream adoption of decentralized infrastructure? Over to you.
People shouldn't feel it. People shouldn't know about it. People should just feel like it's a normal solution without actually being aware of what they're actually building on and what they're actually using. They should use a better version of Google, a better version of TripAdvisor, a better version of charging infrastructure without actually knowing that it's on chain and that it's decentralized.
Awesome. Over to you, Hugo.
I think the future of decentralized physical infrastructure should be one where we don't work in isolation. We also take a learning from existing giants, right? Like in terms of wireless technology or telecommunications, the telcos in the space, what have they been doing for the last, 2 decades, 3 decades that made them successful? Take learnings from that and build it into a sustainable product, and ensure that, you abstract the complexity of the blockchain, make it very easy for people to use, and then let them feel happy and incentivized using it. Yeah.
Lovely, thank you.
Yeah, okay. I think if it's decentralized infrastructure, has to be decentralized, and so it's going to require verification, and it's going to be, it's going to have to be something that we don't already have. Okay.
This is great.
Do you have an answer for us?
That's great, and as you guys know, true love stands the test of time, and so is DePIN, which is here to stay. So thank you for the amazing insights and for you guys to be part of the conversation. Merci beaucoup et à la prochaine.